but this time the consequences were deadly. And when I think about how many people in my state died in February, in March, and April, it just makes me angry. I cannot believe he deceived the American people the way he did. How many people would still be alive today if he just told Americans the truth? He had an obligation to tell them the truth. Ex post facto, he comes up with excuses. They don't carry any weight. It's the truth that matters, especially when it's life and death. In the early days of the pandemic, as we know, President Trump downplayed the threat of the coronavirus. He said it would just go away. He went on TV and said it's no worse than the flu. But he knew that that wasn't the case. He knew it was much more dangerous. What we know now is the president wasn't ill-informed. He was lying to the American people. He was deliberately downplaying the virus to the American people at a time when early steps would certainly have saved lives. People who believe him and follow what he says may have died because of his words. This just reveals that the president treated COVID-19 like a PR problem rather than a once-in-a-generation health crisis. And that takes us to another attempt by Republicans to downplay the current situation. As the pain, the economic pain for millions of Americans advances, Senate Republicans are actually moving backwards. Leader McConnell yesterday announced that by the end of the week, the Senate will vote on a new slimmed-down version of an already skinny Republican bill. Facing the greatest economic crisis in 75 years, the greatest health crisis in a century, Leader McConnell isn't searching for bipartisan progress. He's looking for political cover. What we have now is a stripped-down bill cobbled together not as a serious legislative response, but as a check-the-box vote for vulnerable Republicans so they can pretend like they did something. It's not going to work. People want real results, not political games. And when these senators go home and say, well, I voted for something, they're not producing. They're not producing. Leader McConnell at his press conference said, ask the Democrats what they object to in his bill. How about the corporate immunity plan, which he's known for months we would object to? That's a poison pill, which shows you that he doesn't want the bill to pass. How about the new Betsy DeVos school choice plan, which funnels money into private schools while cutting money from public schools? That's a poison pill. We object to it, Leader McConnell. Take it out of your bill. You can't, because he couldn't get the votes of the far right who didn't want to spend any money, and this is the way he tried to get them to vote for the bill. Clearly, Leader McConnell is not interested in passing a bill, not interested in helping the American people who are in pain, just scoring political points. He seems to be the secretary of cynicism. This is one of the most cynical ploys I've seen because people are dying, people are losing their jobs, people are losing their small businesses. Well, McConnell's ploy won't work because he's not producing any real results, just doing what he seems most comfortable doing, which is playing political games. So now, instead of improving their offer to get bipartisan support, Senate Republicans have made it stingier and even less appropriate to the looming crisis. No money to support state and local governments. Red states and blue states are begging for help. No money to make sure hungry kids and families have food to eat. No money for rental assistance to help families struggle to stay in their homes. No funds to expand broadband for kids who need to go to school now. No money, not enough money to help schools reopen safely. And the money they do have forces kids back into classrooms that may not be safe. It is impossible to look at this GOP proposal and not wonder, do our Republican friends see the damage in America? Or are they still trying to fool the American people by calling up a harshly partisan proposal bipartisan? The truth is, if you wanted to draft a bill that was certain to fail, McConnell's proposal is it. One of the most cynical moves I've ever seen in the midst of a huge crisis. While the Republican plan leaves many behind, we're going to keep fighting for a comprehensive plan that meets the needs of all those who have been hurt by COVID. If passed as prologue, once the Republicans see they can't intimidate us into voting for a wildly insufficient bill, they may come to the table and do what needs to be done, as they did in COVID 2, 3, and 3.5. We hope that will happen, because we want to pass a bill that meets the needs of America. Senator Casey.
I'm honored to be joined today by Senator Schumer, Senator Warren, to talk about this bill. I think if I had to summarize the bill, and there are lots of ways to do that, of course, but this Republican bill leaves out so many. It leaves families, working families, it leaves children, and it leaves frontline workers behind. It does virtually nothing for any of those Americans. It provides immunity, broad, almost total immunity for corporations, but it does nothing to protect workers. As Senator Schumer outlined, the list of what is not in this bill is a lot longer than what's in the bill. Just give you 4 examples. No additional money for state and local government, despite a consensus, a broad bipartisan consensus outside of the U.S. Senate for that kind of support. And we know what will happen. As sure as night follows day, if you don't help state governments, education cuts will continue, and they will continue to lose money, and public safety will be cut at the local level. Number 2, no new money for nursing homes and long-term care to get the death number down. Tens of thousands, at last count, more than 70,000 Americans died in nursing homes or long-term care settings when you add up the workers who died plus the residents. And no new money for home and community-based services, so important to seniors and people with disabilities. Senator Warren has worked so hard on that issue. I have and others, but no response from Republicans on that. Number 4, no additional support for matching dollars for Medicaid, so-called FMAP, at a time when states really need those dollars because they got a hole in their budget that was blown through their budget because of COVID-19. And no help for Medicaid more broadly. Since the second bill we did, the Families First bill, way back in the early part of March. And 4th, and just by way of example, no new money for SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. But I think probably better than maybe the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities can sum up at least 2 issues with real data. Here's a report they issued last night at 8:25 p.m. And just in pertinent part, I'm quoting from the first page of the report, quote, some 19 million children, fully 1 in 4, lived in a household in which people weren't getting enough to eat, that was behind on rent or mortgage or both. 19 million children. And then you go to page 4 of the report, and they talk about the impact that I mentioned before about state and local government support and the impact on education. Quoting here again from Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, quote, states and localities have started making cuts. Indeed, they've cut 1.1 million jobs between February and August, about 60% of them in K through 12 and higher education. So the cutting by state and local governments in the education sector has already started, 1.1 million jobs. And that's just the beginning. We don't know what will happen in the next few months, and certainly we don't know what will happen in 2021. So no matter what way you look at this bill that Leader McConnell is trying to ram through the Senate, after sitting all throughout May, June, July, and August doing virtually nothing but nominations in a defense bill, his attempt to do this, I think, is a last-minute, slap-it-together kind of bill, which does not meet the moment that we're in.
Senator Warren.
Thank you very much for having me here today, Leader Schumer, and thank you. It's always good to be here. With Senator Casey, we partner up on a lot of stuff, and it's nice to be in this fight alongside you. The American people are facing twin threats, threats to our health and threats to our economy. Right now, nearly 200,000 people have died from coronavirus, and more than 10% of workers in the United States are unemployed. What is Mitch McConnell's response to this? For more than 3 months, he has ignored the proposal that the Republicans, that the Democrats passed through the House and have offered here in the Senate, and finally has come up with a bill that he intends to bring to the floor. And what's in that bill? Well, what matters most is what's not in that bill. There's not a single penny to help tenants, people who are being moved out of their homes from evictions at a time when we are in the middle of a pandemic. There is no help to feed hungry families. There is no help for state and local government. State and local government that's trying to support our schools, that's trying to support public safety, that's trying to support public health. There's not enough help for schools that are trying to find a way to reopen safely. There is not enough help for safe elections. We're bearing down on November 3rd. There is no help for worker safety, for people who are being forced into working conditions that put themselves and their families at risk. But this bill has two features that the Republicans want to push. The first is to release liability for giant corporations when people get sick, no matter how reckless the actions are of those corporations. Mitch McConnell says they should get a free pass. That's not going to make anybody in this country safer. The second is to say, let's funnel money, desperately needed money, out of public schools and into private schools. That's not going to help our children safely get back to school and to get the educations that they are entitled to. This is about Donald Trump, but it is also about Senate Republicans who have, for years now, enabled Donald Trump. Even in the vaccine area, as he has pushed politics into the whole development of vaccines and trying to get us safe from the COVID virus, the Senate Republicans have backed him up on this. Just this morning, we had a hearing in the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. I asked Dr. Collins, the head of NIH, about what the effect was of having someone like Donald Trump, who stands up and touts conspiracy theories, who talks about a deep state at the FDA, what that does for the likelihood, even if we're able to develop a virus in order to protect people, what it does to the likelihood that people will be unwilling to go out and get vaccinated. And Dr. Collins said he hopes that the American people will listen to the scientists and the physicians and not to the politicians. Well, I hope that Dr. Collins is right. The American people deserve a safe and effective vaccine, and they deserve a government that is moving only toward that, not influenced by the politics of Donald Trump, who pushes only for his own protection. So I'm glad to be here today to talk about this, but you know, you just reach a point in this where you want to say, what's wrong with these people? Americans are dying across this country. Americans are out of work. Families are hungry. And the Republicans can only talk about releasing liability for giant corporations, no matter how reckless they are. They can only talk about how to divert money from public schools into private schools. It is time for the Republicans in the Senate to live up to their responsibilities to the American people, to set politics aside, and to put the health and the economic well-being of the American people at the forefront.
Well
Mr.
said,
Leader,
both of my colleagues.
direction?
Questions?
Senator Schumer,
Go ahead.
do you support a CR into December?
We're discussing what time the CR should go to, and we haven't formulated our position.